Police found the train exactly where the emergency signal said it would be. Every door was open, the lights were still on, the engine was still running, but there wasn't a single passenger inside, except for one man. He sat alone in the last carriage. His eyes were open. His heartbeat was normal. He was breathing. But no matter how loudly officers shouted, he never blinked. The only thing clutched tightly in his hand was a train ticket. Printed on faded yellow paper were 6 words that no railway company had ever used. Last departure, no return journey. 3 days earlier. Rain hammered the city like thousands of tiny stones. Neon lights shimmered across puddles that stretched along the empty sidewalks, painting the streets in streaks of blue, red, and violet. It was nearly midnight, and the business district that had buzzed with life only hours before now felt abandoned. Adrian pulled his jacket tighter against the cold wind as he hurried toward the bus terminal. His backpack bounced against his shoulder with every step. Inside it were only a few clothes, a laptop, and a train ticket he had bought on a whim earlier that afternoon. He was a freelance travel photographer, constantly moving from one city to another, chasing landscapes and forgotten places that most people never noticed. He preferred traveling at night. Fewer crowds, cheaper tickets, more stories waiting to be discovered. Tonight's assignment had run longer than expected, and he had missed the final bus by less than 2 minutes. The station attendant locked the gate before Adrian could even catch his breath. "Sorry," the man called through the metal bars. "Last trip." Adrian sighed. Figures. He checked his phone. No ride-sharing drivers nearby. Hotels were fully booked because of a city festival. The battery icon blinked red. 2%. Perfect. A cold gust swept through the deserted terminal, carrying with it the distant sound of metal grinding against metal. Adrian turned. At the far end of the street, beyond the closed bus station, an old railway platform glowed beneath flickering lamps. He frowned. He didn't remember seeing a train station when he'd arrived earlier that day. Curiosity tugged at him. Maybe there was one last train. It was worth checking. The platform looked decades older than everything around it. Rust stained the tracks. The station sign was cracked beyond recognition, its letters worn away by time. An ancient clock hung crooked above the entrance. Its hands were frozen at 11:47 p.m. Odd. Adrian glanced at his watch. 11:47. He looked back at the clock. Still frozen. A strange coincidence. Inside, the waiting area was empty. No ticket counters, no vending machines, no security guards, only rows of wooden benches polished smooth by age. A soft announcement echoed through unseen speakers. Final departure arriving shortly. The voice crackled with static. Passengers, please prepare. Then silence. Adrian looked around. No one else seemed to have heard it. In fact, there was no one else. His phone finally died. The screen went black. For a moment, the silence became almost physical. Then, a distant whistle. Long, low, melancholy. The tracks began to vibrate beneath his shoes. A single beam of light emerged from the darkness beyond the tunnel. The train arrived without a sound. Not the rumbling roar of modern rail cars. It simply glided. Its steel exterior was polished but strangely outdated, painted in faded cream and dark green. The windows reflected nothing, not the platform, not Adrian, nothing. The doors slid open. No conductor stepped out. No passengers exited. The cabin lights glowed with a warm amber hue. Against his better judgment, Adrian boarded. The interior smelled faintly of old paper and rain. Soft yellow lights illuminated rows of empty seats lined with dark wood instead of plastic. The train looked preserved from another era. Everything was spotless. Too spotless. He chose a window seat near the middle carriage. As the doors closed behind him, he noticed he wasn't alone after all. An elderly woman knitted quietly near the front. A businessman stared blankly at a newspaper. A teenage girl listened to music through wired headphones. A mother cradled a sleeping child. None of them acknowledged Adrian, not even with a glance. The train began moving, slowly at first, then faster. Outside, city lights blurred into ribbons of color. Adrian relaxed. Maybe tonight wasn't so bad after all. He leaned back, closed his eyes, just for a moment. A loud metallic screech jolted him awake. The train had stopped. He looked outside. The station was unfamiliar. A weathered sign stood beneath a flickering lamp. Its name had been scratched away. No buildings, no roads, only dense fog surrounding the platform. The doors opened. No one entered. No one left. After exactly 30 seconds, the doors closed again. The train continued. Strange. Adrian checked his watch. Still 11:47. He tapped the glass. Nothing. Dead. The businessman suddenly folded his newspaper. He stood, walked toward the exit. The train slowed once more. Another station. Again, no name. The doors opened. The businessman stepped out. The doors closed immediately. The train departed. Adrian watched through the window. The man never moved. He simply stood there, perfectly still, watching the train disappear into the darkness. Minutes later, Adrian noticed something unsettling. The newspaper the businessman had left behind was still on the seat. Curiosity got the better of him. He picked it up. The paper crumbled at the edges. Its date made his stomach tighten. October 14th, 1989. He blinked, looked again. 1989. Nearly 40 years old. The headlines were faded beyond reading, but one photograph remained visible. It showed a train. This train. The caption beneath it read, "Night Express disappears during storm. 47 passengers missing." Adrian's mouth went dry. He slowly looked around the carriage. The elderly woman continued knitting. The mother rocked her sleeping child. The teenager stared out the window. No one reacted, as if nothing was wrong, as if the newspaper didn't exist. The train lights flickered once, then again. The temperature dropped. A voice echoed through hidden speakers, soft, calm, almost comforting. "Next stop." Static swallowed the words. "Please prepare to disembark." The elderly woman stopped knitting. For the first time, she looked directly at Adrian. Her cloudy eyes held neither fear nor surprise, only pity. She smiled gently, then whispered just loudly enough for him to hear, "You weren't supposed to get on this train." The old woman's words hung in the air long after she spoke. "You weren't supposed to get on this train." Adrian forced a nervous smile. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she returned to her knitting, the metal needles clicking together with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The train lurched forward. Outside, the station disappeared into the darkness as if it had never existed. Adrian swallowed. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe this was some kind of historical railway attraction. Maybe the newspaper was a prop. Maybe the passengers were actors. But if that was true, why did none of them acknowledge him? He stood and made his way toward the next carriage. The connecting door groaned as he pushed it open. The second carriage was empty. Every seat, every luggage rack, every corner, empty. Only the rhythmic clatter of the wheels echoed through the compartment. Then, a voice, soft, barely above a whisper. "Help me." Adrian froze. He looked around. Nothing. "Please." It sounded like it came from beneath the seats. He crouched. Only shadows. The whisper stopped. He stood back up, heart pounding. When he turned around, a little girl was standing at the far end of the carriage. She couldn't have been older than 8. She wore a pale yellow raincoat that looked decades out of fashion. Her long black hair covered most of her face. She wasn't there a second ago. "Hey," Adrian called cautiously. "Are you okay?" The girl slowly lifted one hand. She pointed behind him. Adrian spun around. Nothing. Just empty seats. When he looked back, the girl was gone. The train lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. A cold draft swept through the carriage. The whisper returned. This time it wasn't alone. Dozens of whispers. Different voices. Men, women, children, all speaking at once. Too quiet to understand, yet loud enough to feel, as if the train itself was breathing. Adrian hurried back into the previous carriage. The old woman was gone. So was the sleeping child. Only the mother remained. Except she was no longer rocking anyone. Her arms were still wrapped around an invisible child. She gently hummed a lullaby, back and forth, as if she couldn't accept what was missing. Adrian's skin crawled. The train slowed. Another station. This one had a sign. Ash Grove. The paint was peeling. The platform was empty. Beyond it stood dozens of abandoned houses swallowed by vines. No lights, no movement, only silence. The doors slid open. The mother stood, still cradling empty air. She stepped onto the platform without looking back. The doors closed. The train pulled away. Through the window, Adrian watched her continue rocking, standing completely still as the station vanished into the fog. His pulse quickened. Every stop, someone disappeared, without hesitation, without emotion, as if they'd been waiting for their station for years. He rushed toward the emergency intercom beside the door. He pressed the button. Nothing. Again, nothing. He slammed his fist against it. Static hissed from the speaker. Then, a voice. "Remain seated." It wasn't mechanical anymore. It sounded human. "Arrival is inevitable." The speaker went silent. "No," Adrian whispered. "There has to be a conductor." He pushed through another connecting door. Another carriage. Empty. Then another. Empty. Then another. Still empty. The farther he walked, the older the train became. The wallpaper peeled. The lights dimmed. Wood splintered beneath his feet. The smell of damp earth filled the air. Finally, he reached the front carriage. A brass door stood before him. Etched into the metal were 3 words. "Authorized personnel only." He grabbed the handle. Locked. He pounded on it. "Hello?" No answer. He pounded harder. "I know someone's driving this thing." Silence. Then, the door slowly unlocked. By itself. The driver's cabin was empty. No conductor. No controls being operated. Yet the levers moved on their own. Pressure gauges twitched. Steam hissed. The throttle advanced without anyone touching it. The train was driving itself. Adrian backed away. His breathing became shallow. Then he noticed something else. A route map hung on the wall. It wasn't like any railway map he'd ever seen. The stations listed weren't cities. They were dates. 1954, 1978, 1989, 2006, 2018, 2024, each connected by a single black line. His eyes stopped at the bottom. The final destination wasn't a place. It simply read, "Next." A sudden bang echoed behind him. He spun around. The brass door had slammed shut, locked. The cabin lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Only the faint glow of the gauges remained. Then, a voice spoke from somewhere inside the room, deep, calm, ancient. "You should have left at the first station." Adrian's heart pounded. "Who's there?" No answer. The darkness seemed to shift. Slowly, a silhouette emerged near the windshield. Tall, unnaturally thin, its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its face had none, only smooth, pale skin stretched over where features should have been. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Yet Adrian could feel it. Watching him, the thing slowly raised one impossibly long arm and pointed through the front window. The tracks ahead disappeared into an ocean of thick white fog. Then, for just a split second, the fog parted. Another train sped past in the opposite direction. Inside every window, passengers screamed silently. They pounded desperately against the glass. Some clawed at the windows until blood covered the panes. Others simply stared, motionless, empty, as the ghostly train vanished into the darkness. The faceless figure tilted its head. Then it disappeared. The lights returned. The cabin was empty once again. Adrian stumbled backward into the passenger carriage. He didn't care about finding answers anymore. He just wanted off. The next station couldn't come soon enough. This time, he wouldn't stay on the train. Whatever happened, he was getting off. As if hearing his thoughts, the announcement echoed through the speakers. Soft, gentle, almost welcoming. Next stop, home. Adrian looked out the window. In the distance, he recognized the skyline of his own city. The same buildings, the same bridge, the same apartment towers. Relief washed over him. Finally, the nightmare was over. The train slowed. The station came into view. Everything looked familiar. Almost. Yet something felt wrong. There wasn't a single person waiting on the platform. Not one. The station clock read 11:47 p.m. Exactly the same time. Exactly the same frozen minute. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. Cool night air drifted inside. Freedom was only a few steps away. Adrian grabbed his backpack and stepped onto the platform. The doors closed behind him immediately. He turned just in time to see the train pulling away as it disappeared into the fog. Every passenger inside slowly turned their heads toward him, every single one, smiling, not with relief, not with kindness, but with the expressions of people who had finally found someone to take their place. The train disappeared into the fog. Its taillights faded into two tiny red dots, then vanished. Silence. Adrian stood alone on the platform, his chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. "I made it," he whispered. "I actually made it." For the first time in what felt like hours, the air didn't feel unnaturally cold. The station looked familiar. The vending machines, the old coffee kiosk, the faded map beside the ticket gates. He had passed through this station dozens of times. He laughed nervously. Maybe exhaustion had gotten the better of him. Maybe he'd fallen asleep on the train. Maybe the whole thing had been some bizarre nightmare. He walked toward the exit. The automatic ticket gate didn't open. Instead, a dull red light blinked. Access denied. He frowned. He tried another gate. Same result. Another. Still nothing. Hello? His voice echoed across the empty station. No reply. No footsteps. No station announcements. Nothing. He climbed over the barrier instead. The moment both feet touched the other side, the lights above him shut off, one by one. Darkness spread across the station like ink. Only the platform behind him remained illuminated. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he turned around. The train was back. It hadn't arrived. It had simply appeared, standing silently on the tracks. Every carriage light glowed a warm amber. Every window was occupied. This time, every passenger was looking directly at him. The old woman stood first. She smiled sadly, then raised one trembling hand, not waving, pointing at Adrian. The other passengers followed, one by one. The businessman, the mother, the little girl in the yellow raincoat. Dozens of strangers, all pointing. Then, as if following an invisible command, they spoke together. Not loudly, not angrily, just one sentence. "You're late." The train whistle screamed. The platform lights exploded. Glass rained onto the concrete. Adrian ran. He burst through the station doors into the city. Rain lashed against his face. The streets were exactly where they should be. The coffee shop, the pharmacy, the convenience store on the corner. Relief washed over him. He wasn't trapped anymore. People. He needed people. Across the street, a young couple walked beneath a shared umbrella. Adrian sprinted toward them. "Excuse me." They kept walking. "Please." Nothing. He stepped directly in front of them. The couple walked straight through him, as though he were made of mist. Adrian froze. No. He looked down at his own hands. They were still there. Solid. Real. Weren't they? A passing taxi splashed through a puddle. It drove through the exact spot where he stood. Without slowing. Without hitting him. Without even noticing him. His stomach dropped. He rushed toward the glass window of a closed electronics store. The city reflected perfectly. Streetlights, cars, rain, neon signs, everything except him, where he should have been. There was only empty sidewalk. His breathing stopped. He stepped closer. Nothing. No reflection. His hands shook uncontrollably. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm right here." A voice answered behind him. "No." He spun around. The old woman stood beneath the awning, dry despite the pouring rain. She looked older now, almost transparent. "You left the train," she said softly, "but the journey never ended." "What are you talking about?" "You boarded after the final departure." "I got off." She slowly shook her head. "No one gets off." Adrian backed away. "I walked out." "You believed you did." "What does that mean?" The old woman sighed. "The train doesn't carry passengers. It carries moments." Adrian stared blankly. She continued. Everyone aboard boarded during the last ordinary night of their lives. The businessman was driving home after missing his son's birthday. The mother was searching for her child after the flood. The little girl, her voice faltered. She waited for parents who never arrived. They all stepped onto the train believing they were going home. They never realized they had already left the world behind. Adrian's heartbeat thundered in his ears. No, I wasn't dead. You were. Fragments flooded his mind. Rain, headlights, a blinding horn, screeching tires, his phone lighting up with an incoming message. He'd looked down, only for a second. A freight truck, skidding across the intersection, metal twisting, glass exploding, darkness. He staggered backward. No, no. The old woman nodded sadly. You never reached the station. You never missed your bus. The journey began the moment your heart stopped. Adrian collapsed to his knees. Everything around him shimmered. Buildings flickered. Cars faded. The city dissolved into pale mist. The station returned, ancient, silent, waiting. The train stood beside the platform. Its doors open, patient. The old woman offered her hand. You can keep running. It won't change where the tracks lead. Or, she looked toward the train. You can remember. Adrian looked through the windows. For the first time, the passengers no longer appeared frightening. They looked tired. People who had been waiting far too long. Not prisoners, travelers. What happens? If I get back on, you reach your station. And if I don't, you'll wander forever. The wind carried the distant whistle. Adrian closed his eyes. He thought about his parents, his younger sister, the mountains he never photographed, the places he promised himself he'd visit, the conversations he kept postponing. How many times had he believed, there will always be tomorrow? He slowly stood. Without another word, he stepped onto the train. The doors closed. The whistle sounded. The train began moving. This time, the atmosphere felt different. Peaceful. Outside the windows, the endless darkness slowly gave way to morning light. Fields stretched across the horizon. Golden sunlight spilled over distant hills. The passengers smiled gently. Some closed their eyes. Others quietly held the hands of loved ones. The old woman folded her knitting for the last time. You remembered. Adrian smiled faintly. I think I finally did. The announcement echoed through the carriage. Clear, warm, without static. Final destination. The train slowed. Beyond the window, there was only brilliant white light. One by one, the passengers stood. The businessman tipped his hat. The mother held the hand of a little boy who had somehow appeared beside her. The girl in the yellow raincoat laughed as two distant figures ran toward her. They stepped through the light and disappeared. The old woman turned to Adrian. This is your stop. She smiled. Then she was gone. Adrian took one deep breath and stepped forward. The light embraced him. The train doors closed. The last carriage disappeared into the horizon. 3 days later, railway maintenance workers responded to an emergency signal near an abandoned stretch of track that had been closed since 1989. They found no train, no passengers, only a weathered leather backpack lying beside the rails. Inside were a camera, a dead phone, and dozens of photographs. Every picture showed beautiful landscapes Adrian had taken over the years, except the final image. It wasn't a mountain, or a city, or a forest. It was a photograph of an old cream and green train disappearing into thick white fog. Standing in the last carriage doorway was Adrian. He wasn't frightened. He wasn't calling for help. He was simply smiling, as though he'd finally found the place he'd been traveling toward all his life. The investigators searched every railway record in the country. No train matching that description had operated since the Night Express disappeared during a storm in 1989. Officially, the line never reopened. Unofficially, night shift railway workers still tell each other one rule: if you're alone after midnight and a train quietly arrives at a platform that isn't on any map, never board it, because the last train doesn't stop twice. If this story kept you watching until the very last stop, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more horror stories. And tell us in the comments, if a silent train arrived at an empty platform after midnight, would you get on?